Of White Hairs in Cricket by Rohinton Mistry. This is one of my favourite stories because I think lots of people can connect with this story, particularly students of your age, because who hasn't had that moment when they realize that death is going to come to all of us. And when you see your parents for the first time as growing older, and the fact that we are not all going to live forever, and that death is the only surety in life is that we're all going to die, and realizing that this is going to happen to the ones we love as well. A summary of this story. In the beginning of the story, the protagonist is plucking out the white hair from his father's head. This is because the father is looking for a job and wants to look young. So he thinks that if he gets rid of the white hair, he's more likely to secure a job. He's been unemployed for a while, but even so, he still goes out every week and looks for jobs. The protagonist gets sick of pulling out the white hairs, and he puts down the tweezers and goes out. He sees his friend Viraf talking to the doctor. He waits for a little bit, then goes up to speak to Viraf himself. And he's joking and curious about why Viraf was talking to the doctor. Viraf, however, is upset because it's revealed that his father is sick, and that's why he was talking to the doctor. The protagonist sees Viraf's father in bed with needles sticking out of him, and he realizes this is his defining moment, because he realizes the fact that his own father is mortal also. Mortal means the ability to die. So he realizes that his own father is going to die at some point as well. This realization, coupled with his earlier remembrance of how his father once used to take him and his brother out to play cricket on a Sunday and does not do so anymore, along with the fact that there are more white hairs on his father's head every week, helps him to see that his father is growing old and that one day he will die. The protagonist, rushes home and wants to resume plucking out the white hair, but his ego stops him. He wants his father to ask him first if he will pluck his hairs out. The father doesn't, and so the protagonist goes to his room and cries. He weeps because he and his father are helpless in the face of the fact of their mortality. So that's a really sad but important part of the story. The setting of this short story is in India. And it's in an apartment which is well past its time. It's decaying. It's an old apartment which is not very modern, and it shows their poverty. There's a flashback to when he used to play cricket on a Sunday with his father, but now every Sunday, instead of playing cricket, he has to pluck out the white hairs on his father's head. So this is a Sunday ritual. In bed, he eats rice, which is luxurious, but then at the end of the story, he returns to his bed to be sorrowful. When he realizes about his father's and his own mortality. But you have to think about why the setting is important, the so what of it. Well, the luxuries of youth are ephemeral, which means that the rose-tinted spectacles, like the looking back on your youth with happy thoughts, which are not necessarily realistic. And also, the setting shows that happiness can be found even in a poor setting. So you could compare this to Tudor in Memoriam, when the grandmother lives in a rural and poor setting, but even so, she's very happy. And this can be seen in this story as well. The structure of the story. Well, it is a process of growing up and the realization of the fact that time and death is unstoppable. And the structure of this story gives the readers an idea that initially the narrator wanted to be able to stop time, stay in his childhood, have an easy life, but in fact, he can't. It begins with white hairs. The story begins with white hairs being plucked out, and it concludes with the death of what? Nobody actually dies in this story, but it's the death of his youth and his innocence, the death of his childhood. You could compare this to Games at Twilight, where Ravi also loses his innocence. This is a rite of passage story because the rite of passage for the narrator is when he realizes that his father is going to die, he realizes the mortality of his father, and so it makes him grow up. The narrative viewpoint of this story. It's written from the perspective of the narrator, who is a young boy. So it's written from the first person narration. An epiphany means when you have a sudden realization or understanding of something. And after his epiphany, the narrator realizes and learns to appreciate his family because they are not going to be around forever. His relationship with his Mamaji, which is his grandmother, he looks to her for guidance, but he later realizes the value in his parents as well. They too are aging, and he realizes again that they won't be around forever. This narrative viewpoint allows us to see into the narrator's mind and his character, and it allows us to, number one, connect with him, and number two, it allows us to reflect on ourselves and our own lives and our own families and how death will come to those that we love as well. And it makes us possibly think about how we treat those we love and reminding us that, in fact, they won't be around forever. The narrative style of this story. Who is the narrator? Well, he's a 14-year-old boy. Perhaps it is actually Rohinton Mistry himself, looking back on his life and when he realized that his parents were going to die. So this might be like Tudor in Memoriam, might be autobiographical. Perhaps it was inspired by a boyhood memory of Rohinton, Mistry. The narrative style, as we said, is first person point of view, but I think it's important to mention that the story is told through a child's eyes. So the way the story is told is perhaps different than Tujaddara Memoriam, for example, which is clearly autobiographical, and she's telling the story from a number of years later. Also, like Tyres, when when the narrator Raoul is also telling the story from a number of years later, looking back on an event that happened in his childhood. So you might want to think about how the fact that it's told from a child's point of view changes or affects the perspective of the story. And is he a reliable narrator? Possibly, possibly not. He is a child. The characters that we can see in this story, or the characters we meet in this story, sorry. Well, the narrator is, again, first person point of view, and therefore the readers identify with him and his realizations in the story. We see his feelings towards his father and his grandmother predominantly. Although his mother is in this story and she's an important part, we don't really learn that much about her. The narrator's development from the cozy and comforting youth and innocence of his childhood to his later acknowledgement of mortality, both his own and those he loves, is an important part of his characterization. He realizes that he cannot slow down or stop his father and the others that he loves from aging and eventually dying. This is something that children realize as they get older, and it's his epiphany moment, his rite of passage. And often it's a traumatic experience when children learn about death. And it certainly is for this boy, the narrator, and we can see this when he goes home to weep in his bed. Also, he calls his father Daddy, which shows how young and childish he really is. So although he does have his rite of passage moment, he still in some ways is a child. He's in that difficult stage of not quite being a child and not quite being an adult. Those teenage years where you're not really sure where you fit in. And finally, he realizes that he does not have the ability to always keep his family with him. Death will take them. The father is a central character in this story, and he plays a decisive and defining role in the boy's life, and therefore also his character development. He is growing older, and this is seen through the white hairs that are increasing week by week. He's also a strong-minded and defiant person. He absolutely believes week in, week out that he will get a job, even though he's not successful. Also, he's constantly looking for something better. He's determined and he dreams big. He is hoping that he can send his son away to America. And maybe this resembles Rohinton Mistry's own emigration to Canada. Also, the father is used to represent theme. And for all Daddy's white hairs that I was powerless to stop death.